Cashapp WavyOcho. I'm gonna react to how being a real gangster saved, then ruined this podcast of life.
Span of half a decade,
Taxstone went from goofing around on Twitter to having Jay-Z want to meet him personally. He was a refreshingly honest voice.
Damn, that's crazy. Jay Z wanna meet this nigga Taxstone, bro. I think Jay Z would have helped Taxstone, career and all that.
in hip-hop punditry,
But is now set to face years, potentially decades behind bars. Taxstone's real name is Daryl Campbell, and he was born in Brooklyn in 1985. Decades before he would become famous for podcasting, he had a short stint as a child actor. He even briefly appeared in the popular 90s police drama New York Undercover, but this was largely an unsuccessful venture, so his acting career was abandoned. In his 20s, Taxstone didn't have many bright prospects ahead, so he was involved in a life of crime. It was during this time that Taxstone got a bullet in his left eye, leaving him permanently blind there. In 2006, he was arrested for gun possession and robbery charges. He was 21 years old and would spend 3 years behind bars. In 2009, he got out of Rikers Island and joined Twitter. This seemingly mundane decision to start a social media profile would change his life forever. He was known for his wild sense of humor that documented the life he was living as an ex-con in Brooklyn. It wasn't the most family-friendly brand of humor, with many jokes involving him making fun of strippers and ranking his STDs. He was known as one of the loudest typers in the golden age of Black Twitter. He sometimes would tweet 100 times a day and started to gain quite an audience.
Nah, that's OD, bro. 100 times a day. I can't do that.
for himself. But as
As an
an
ex-con, he went down the all-too-familiar cycle of having no job after prison and mixing with the same friends, so he was still living a life of crime once again. In January 2012, he got into an altercation at the Hype Lounge in Manhattan and faced other charges of assault and intimidation, as well as carrying weapons. But his newfound fame on social media was something that could possibly break the cycle for him. On January 8th, 2015, he was invited onto the Brilliant Idiots podcast, which is hosted by Charlemagne and Andrew Schultz. He gave them a unique insight to the life he led, where he said that most of the people he shot was out of fear and nobody wants to be a gangster. It's something people have to become to survive. Taxstone was giving people a perspective that wasn't really present in hip-hop media. He gained thousands of followers on Twitter off the back of his appearance on Brilliant Idiots. Brilliant Idiots is part of Loudspeakers Network. Kid Fury, another podcast host at the network, recommended Taxstone to their CEO, and a couple of months later, Taxstone had his own podcast, Tax Season. It was an instant hit and received 40,000 listeners in the show's first episode. His incredibly honest takes and humor were something that were part of his brand. When trying to encapsulate what made him so popular, he said, "I would share a story about catching an STD, while someone else would be like, I never caught an STD." And the fact that Taxstone was a complete outsider worked to his advantage. There were no relationships
Talking about STDs and all that shit. It's dirty.
hip-hop that he wanted to
protect and maintain. He never courted people for interviews and would unapologetically say rappers were whack if he thought they were. In an interview with Vlad TV, he claimed that both Tupac and Cameron were snitches because their rap verses about getting shot contained information that the police might not already have. He was incredibly controversial, but also authentic in what he said. Eventually, Taxstone's podcast went from commenting on hip-hop culture to shaping. In September 2016, video footage emerged of Beanie Siegel getting punched in the head. The perpetrator was Tiffy Bay, a friend of Meek Mill. Hip-hop radio stations and news outlets would have killed for an exclusive interview with Siegel at this time. But Siegel, who was already on the Tax Breaks podcast, chose to appear again to explain what happened. Importantly, Taxstone did not contact Beanie and ask for an interview. Beanie asked him to appear on his podcast. This was at the heat of the Drake and Meek Mill beef, and to have Beanie Siegel publicly slander Meek Mill for an entire podcast was making the headlines. Bleak even complimented Taxstone on his work ethic and said, "He's a good businessman. He's up before the birds chirp, tweeting beef before the sun up. He don't eat no oatmeal or nothing." Memphis Bleak also introduced Taxstone to Jay-Z because Jay wanted to meet him, and Jay is a figure that transcends hip-hop. So mainstream outlets such as Vice, BET, VH1, and MTV all wanted to speak with Taxstone too. Tax was now invited by Charlemagne to appear on his show once again, but instead of the Brilliant Idiots podcast, Tax was now on Charlemagne's MTV2 panel show Uncommon Sense. He was making friends in high places, but also making some enemies too. And his whole appeal is that he was unafraid to ruffle a few feathers. One of his biggest feuds was with DJ Ebro, who claimed he was not fully representing New York artists. This escalated into Taxstone calling Ebro's partner a lesbian on Instagram, so Ebro used his position in media to get
Damn, you violated, bro. Calling his partner lesbian and all that. Lesbian, les, and all that.
Taxstone canceled
from the MTV show Uncommon Sense. And Ebro was completely unapologetic about this. He said, "You put my daughter's mother on Instagram, going after her, so I called executives at MTV and you got suspended."
Damn, Ebro got this man Taxstone suspended. Damn. I guess Ebo don't play about his family.
This was a beef that
would have harmed Taxstone's career, but his feud with Troy Ave was when things got taken too far. The origins and exact timeline of Tax's beef with Troy Ave is heavily disputed. Tax has talked about getting into an altercation with him in 2004 outside a gas station when Troy was still trying to sell his CDs, but Troy Ave denies that this ever happened. On Taxstone's Twitter account, he seems to constantly take shots at him. Interestingly, Troy Ave tweeted in 2011, "Yesterday at Taxstone asked me to call him. He apologized for the disrespect. Not like a pussy, but like a man. Ain't hurt my money, so I accepted it." However, the constant shots taken at Troy continued throughout the years. In 2015, someone asked him on Twitter how to start a podcast, and Taxstone jokingly responded by joking on Troy Ave. In 2016, T.I. performed a concert at New York's Irving Plaza. Troy Ave and Taxstone were in attendance, and were now both going to be under the same roof. It was a life-changing moment for both of them. What happened that night depends on who you ask. The undisputed facts are that Troy Ave and Taxstone got into an altercation. Troy Ave was shot in the leg, and Troy's bodyguard, Ronald McFadder, was sadly shot dead. Surveillance footage showed Troy Ave firing a gun during the outbreak, which led to his arrest. This gun was found at the back of Troy Ave's vehicle, which he claims was used in self-defense. It wasn't until January 2017 that Taxstone was arrested in connection with the shooting. Taxstone's DNA was found on the gun too. They also traced the original owner of the gun, and that was someone connected to Taxstone. It was highly likely that this was Taxstone's gun. By June 2017, Taxstone pled guilty to these gun charges, but he was now charged with the murder of Troy Ave's bodyguard, but pled not guilty. It had been 8 years, but Taxstone was back in Rikers Island, and this time around, he might be expected to be there much longer. Troy Ave also went through an incredibly difficult time, as well as getting shot in the leg and losing his bodyguard and close friend. He was also initially accused of murder. In February 2018, he did not hold back and released a song named Too Legit to Quit, where he claims to have wrestled the gun away from Taxstone. In February 2023, Troy Ave got up and testified to give his recollection on what happened. Troy Ave was in the green room before the concert, and because of his newfound fame, Taxstone was also there. Rather than ignore each other, Taxstone said, "What's poppin'?" to Troy Ave, and this was not taken too well. Troy Ave felt that he sounded threatening. His bodyguard came over with the intention of intimidating or hitting Taxstone, but Taxstone pulled a gun out. Upon hearing the gun, Troy Ave wrestled with Taxstone. Taxstone managed to shoot Ave in the leg, but through some sort of adrenaline rush or survival instinct, Ave managed to wrestle with Taxstone and took the gun off him. On Thursday, March 22nd, 2023, Taxstone was convicted for killing Ronald McFadder. Luckily for him, he was charged with manslaughter and not murder. Other charges include 2 counts of assault in the first degree, 1 count of assault in the second degree, and 2 counts of criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree. Following the guilty verdict, Troy Ave didn't take long to break his silence. He released another song called Dear Hater, I Won. Taxstone is set to receive his sentence in April of 2023. As well as Troy Ave, another New York rapper who Taxstone consistently took shots at was Math Hoff. On the No Jumper podcast, Math Hoff made quite an insightful remark about the fact that Taxstone felt the need to bring a gun with him to the T.I. concert. He said, "This guy who had an incredible voice, but felt like it was necessary to go with people where he was from, which put him in a position where he felt like he had to carry something to protect himself from the stuff that he was instigating." Taxstone is still active on social media, Twitter specifically, but in short bursts since his arrest. Tax Season was a huge podcast in 2016, and with the direction that hip-hop podcasting has gone since, he would be an incredibly successful man by now. In 2018, Joe Budden signed a deal with Spotify, and Drink Champs recently signed a lucrative contract with Warner Music. Hip-hop podcasting today is a multi-8-figure business for some, and this was only taken off when Taxstone was starting out as the head honcho in it. Fans of Taxstone are now left wondering.
Okay, that's the vid. Yeah, let me know what y'all think about this situation involving Taxstone, bro. Him like facing life in in the island, bro. Alright, make sure y'all like, subscribe, y'all know the vibes. We were just checking out you are.